Hi everyone, my name is Chloé Messdaghi, and today we're going to talk about burnout. Let me just share my slides 1 second. Hopefully you guys can see it. Let's begin, shall we? So today we're going to talk about no more burnout. Yay! Okay, I'll be honest with you. This talk isn't about just solving burnout for you personally, but also how you can reduce the amount as well. But things to be to recognize if you are or you think that you may be burned out. But before I start, I just want to remind everyone that you really don't know what people are dealing with in their personal life, and it's really important to just be kind as possible. And also, sometimes we need to practice forgiveness. It's been a rough year plus with the pandemic. There was no guidebook of how to survive this, and we're all going through different moments in our life. But I can guarantee you that you're probably at that point where you're walking a very fine line of being okay and feeling like you are broken at the same time, and that's okay. But before we dive in, for those that don't know who I am, my name is Chloé Messdaghi. I am a growth management consultant, but also the co-founder of Hacking is Not a Crime, co-founder of Women of Security, also known as WOSEC, and founder of We Are Hackers. And that is my URL and my Twitter and Instagram. Feel free to follow anytime. But let's dive into the real reason why we're here. I want you to imagine that you're driving. And when you're driving, you're supposed to merge into the left lane. But at this moment, you think to yourself, what if I don't look in my mirrors when I merge? What if I just merge? If I get in a car accident, that means I don't need to do that thing, or I don't need to complete that assignment. That gives me about a week or 2 weeks break. Like I wouldn't have to worry about anything. I can get a break from everything that I'm struggling so hard to deal with. Or perhaps you maybe have gone in this moment where you used to respond to emails and text messages, within minutes of receiving, but now it's taking you like an hour, couple hours, maybe a day or two. Or perhaps you're one of those people that now you just not picking up your phone. You may not actually be busy at all. You just can't deal with it. You'd rather just watch TV or watch a movie or just stare at a wall, because the reality is, if you pick up that phone call, someone's going to want something from you. So you may be avoiding friends and family and loved ones because of that situation, is that you are afraid that you're going to have more added to your plate and you're already struggling, or you feel like you might be drowning at this point. And you may see that your emotions are very different than usual. You can suddenly get angry, you can suddenly get really sad, and you may have friends and family that have said, hey, I'm worried about you, you've been a little bit different. Or you might just be aggravated at this point. You might feel empty. You may feel like that you're drowning, you feel trapped. And that's the thing, is that sometimes we get this way when we're burned out. Or maybe pushing things to a later date. I know sometimes we're like, oh, it's not due till the next day. Oh, I'm just going to wait until that day before. That's okay. We do that all the time as humans. When we don't want to do something, we wait till the last minute. But the reality is, when you're pushing things out all the time, when you used to always be on top of your game, then you know something is off. Or maybe you've been reaching for a little bit more, of the booze, or you used to drink maybe like a glass of wine a week. Now you're drinking it daily. Or you may be using more edibles than you usually used to self-cope with everything. Or you may be going back to smoking cigarettes, or you may be drinking more caffeine than usual. Say, for example, you used to drink a cup of coffee, now you drink 3. Or you're drinking a Red Bull, or you're drinking Monster, whatever is your choice. Or you may be actually reaching for like the sweets and the savory stuff and snacking because you're either bored or really anxious, or you literally, let's be real, burned out. Well, overall, you may have felt at this point I'm so tired. No matter what I do with my life and no matter how much sleep I get, it's not enough. I just feel depleted. I feel exhausted, no matter how much hours of sleep. And this is where we come to burnout. All those examples are showing someone who's running on a very, very low battery. Think of it as your cell phone. It's still functionable, granted, but how functionable is it? That's the thing to think about with burnout, is that it is something that we probably have all gone through at some point in our lives, but we probably definitely went through it during this time of a pandemic. Now, I just want to first remind everyone, I am not a therapist. I am a growth management consultant. I grow to start startups. I grow them internally and externally. I do marketing. I also do strategy and operations, but I'm not a therapist. However, I have researched and talked to therapists about burnout. But I do want to remind people that if you start showing any signs a little bit of off, for example, you have low energy, you may want to go and get your vitals checked. I've had this happen before where I had to get my blood checked to see why I was so tired. And I just kind of had a feeling it was probably like low iron or lack of vitamin Bs. These are usually things that you find out, or you have a lack of vitamin D. And so I got my blood checked out. Turned out that I had basically, my iron was a little bit low. So I had to go on some iron supplements, and then I turned out to be okay 2 weeks later. But the thing is to know your body well. And if you notice that you're more tired than usual, or you're getting more like minor chronic pain, then you might want to go see your doctor and get some blood work done, just to make sure that it is your body and not just your mental health. For those that don't know what is burnout, here's a textbook definition. Burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. It's caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet constant demands. In other words, it used to be like, think about it this way. You used to drink a glass of wine, when you're having a rough day and you feel better, or you take a bubble bath and you feel better. The difference between stress and prolonged stress, that where it gets to a point of burnout, it starts mimicking depression and anxiety. And if you already have that, it makes it even worse. So what that is like is that when you used to drink that one glass of wine or have that one bubble bath, you feel better, feel less stressed. This is, no matter how much wine you drink, no matter how many bubble baths you take, you cannot change how you feel. And that is the difference between burnout and stress. And yes, there is a quiz right there. And this quiz is great for you when it comes to how do I know if I'm burned out or not. However, if you like the type of work that you do, or you like your employer, chances are that quiz may not work well for you, but it's a good kind of quiz that you can kind of take to get a good idea. But I'm going to show you how you know you have burnout. Remember those examples we had at the beginning of this talk? Those are all signs and symptoms of burnout. So you can always use those as a guide of reference. But we'll also go through how to know when you're starting to get to that point. Now, the other thing I want you to be aware of is that I'm not just going to talk about regular burnout. We also have emotional burnout from COVID-19. And this is basically the part that may be draining you at this point. We've been in this pandemic for over a year. We have lost people. We may have lost our jobs. We may have changed our body image. And by change is not, we ate more, we ate less during this time because of anxiety or depression. But also we may have increased our usage of, tobacco, alcohol, or marijuana just to make us cope through this process. But the reality is that therapists were really, really worried at the beginning of this pandemic, because the reality is that not everyone wants to go and see a therapist. And this is a problem because a lot of times people that don't want to see therapists actually need to see a therapist because they impact other people by not checking in with themselves. And this is one of the things I want to recommend everyone to do, is to go and see a therapist if you're feeling any of these symptoms. And the reasoning for that is that you need to put yourself first. The reason that we're kind of in this spot is because we aren't listening to our bodies. We're not listening to what's going on with us, or we're dismissing it and ignoring it, and it's catching up on us. And the reality is that we had some really, really, really strong moments throughout this year. Hard moments. We've lost people. We've been afraid of our own health, if we can handle getting COVID or not. We've turned on the news and saw what was going on, and it scared us. We feel divided more than ever before. It is a hard place to be. And it's understandable if you ate more or you ate less, or you couldn't sleep, or you're oversleeping now, or you're having trouble concentrating, or maybe you're noticing that your memory is a little bit off. And that's okay. It is okay right now to note that. But it's also important for you to be aware of the impact that you have on other people. So it's important for you to recognize that this may be a moment where you might want to find a therapist. But let's talk a little bit about how to prevent burnout. Now, these are strategies to know if you're starting to head into the burnout direction, how to have that moment. But of course, always we recommend is exercise, eat a balanced diet, practice good sleep habits, ask for help. And I'll be honest, the first three are really hard to do during the pandemic because some of us couldn't go to a gym. Some of us don't really know how to exercise as well when we're by ourselves. We also don't have the resources to exercise if we're not in an area where it's always nice and warm to go and do jogging or whatnot. But also eating a balanced diet is hard if you only were able to go to a grocery store every other week because you didn't want to expose yourself to the virus by any chance by shopping. So it's hard because you're going to buy not as many fresh fruits and veggies, and you're going to get more of the carbs stuff that has a longer shelf life and things that are frozen. And that is another thing to think about. We are what we eat, you guys. Let's be real with each other. We can keep ignoring it, but in reality, we are what we eat. But practicing sleep habits is also a hard thing because there's no separation from work and personal life because we're working from our home more than ever before. So knowing where that division is hard because you might be thinking that you need to check your email in the middle of the night or right before bed or first thing in the morning. And this doesn't do really good sleep habits. Also, asking for help is really hard when you think of everyone around you who else is struggling. It's really hard to ask for help, right? And this is the key thing. When we're dealing with burnout, it's something that we need to be aware of is that we need to be self-aware of who we are and what we're doing. We need to be aware that we're entering a moment where we're going beyond just regular stress. It's becoming something prolonged, or we're not who we are. We feel like we're depleted of energy. So this is something to be aware of when it comes to self-awareness. But sometimes that's a little bit hard to do if you're very much in your head and you're very overly anxious, or you just feel like you're trapped. Sometimes I find that the fastest way to know if I am going through a moment of extreme stress, I don't really recognize it right away in my head. So instead, what I do is I journal, and you don't have to force yourself to journal every single day. And by saying I'm going to journal every single day, you're setting yourself up to fail, and that's not going to make you feel good either. Think about it more of like, I'm going to journal when I can journal, when I feel like journaling. And when you feel like you're very mixed and confused and you don't really know what to do with your life, or you're in a moment where like you have so much stress on your shoulders, the weight is like holding you back or holding you down, it might be a good time to journal. And by doing that, what you want to do is after you do your entry in for that day, look at previous ones and see if you see any words or trends in it. You might see the word trapped often, empty often, overly anxious, or something like that. And you want to be aware of that because that's letting you know that you are already in burnout. You may not know it, but you are. When you start having those feelings, that is straight up burnout. And those examples that I used before, that's a good way to also check to see if you are burnt out. The other thing that you can do is take a break. So once a week, take a break from all your devices. That means getting off your computer. That means getting off your phone. I know it's hard, right? Because we live on our phones, we live on our laptops and everything. But what that means is disconnecting from the world a bit, because we need it more than ever before. We don't really have the ability to go out and drinking out at a pub, hanging out with friends, unless you're in New Zealand. I am so jealous of you guys. But the reality is that we're not there quite yet in many parts of the world. And it's really important that we take a break for ourselves. That might be binge watching a TV series. That might be going for a hike, or this might be playing with some kittens or some dogs. Like, take a break, read a book. Read a book, you guys. And when I say read a book, I'm talking about like this day that you take the day off, don't do anything infosec related, because we live and breathe infosec, and infosec is our life. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be that we have a life outside of our work, and we're not doing that. And that's why we're burned out, because we can't separate the two. And it's okay. You can still be passionate, but also have a life outside of infosec. So that means maybe you take that moment of your break to like go painting or something, or learn how to play the guitar, or I don't know, pick up some dance moves that you've always wanted to learn. Thing is, take a break away from infosec at least once a week. And now when you do get off your phone and everything, you want to make sure you let the loved ones around you in your life know that you're okay, and that you're taking a break between this hour and that hour, and that if they need to get a hold of you, here's the backup situation. So that's one way how to do it. Write it down, besides the journaling, is more like having a to-do list. When last year I recognized that I was going through burnout, I basically pulled out my handy dandy notebook, and in this handy dandy notebook, and if anyone understands that phrase, my handy dandy notebook, you are a Blue's Clues kid, and I love that. But what you do is you basically write down everything that you need to do in your life. That means your work, that means your personal life, everything that is due that you need to do for yourself or for someone else, you write that down. Now, I know that it's really hard to do. In a sense, like you're overly anxious thinking about this idea. Don't get me wrong, okay? I am someone who struggles with anxiety in my life. But the one thing I can tell you is that when I first did this, I recognized a pattern, which is overcommitting to things and projects and always saying yes to things. And it was 5 pages long on, like, you know, your 8x10 or 8x11 sheet paper, lined and everything. And I recognized I cannot do this to myself anymore. So I started doing it is going through that list and trying to figure out if I can delegate some of these tasks. But I also recognized was that I'm getting to the point in my career that I put my career before my own self-care. And that was the moment where my to-do list really opened my eyes that I'm failing myself. And this is the reason why I'm burned out. So it's important that when you first do it, it's going to be overwhelming. It might be 5 pages or more, but I have to let you know that now I have it at 1 page only. And I also run 3 organizations. Of course, I have wonderful teams of people, so that really helps a lot. But the reality is that you know how much you are having to provide, and you shouldn't have to be that giving tree. And if you don't know what the giving tree is, read that book. It is sad, but it's so good. And you don't want to be the giving tree. But one of the other things to know is that when we're starting to feel burned out in our life, it's also, it might be a good time to get out of your head and get in touch with another person. In a sense, volunteering really helps because it allows you to get out of your space, allows you to learn more about the world you live in, but it's also, you see people that are giving as well. And I think we need to be reminded of that once in a while when we work in such a bleak kind of world in our industry. It can be very dark what we do. And so being around people that have that sense of wanting to give to the community and participate in the community and wanting to roll up your sleeves to serve your community, that's something that really matters a lot. And it does help you remind you that you're connected to all these other human beings that are around you. And it might actually help you also kind of figure out a little bit more about yourself that you didn't know that you were like. But one thing I want to say is that if you are a manager and you're listening to this conversation, or should I say this talk, don't micromanage, because when you're micromanaging, it's never going to be a good thing for any employee. And the one thing I'll tell you is that when we had to work from home because of the pandemic, there were so many employers that were not happy about this because they want to see you work in a physical office, because they believe that if you work in a physical office, that you're going to work harder. But the thing they don't remember, or they didn't even notice, was the fact that, hey, if I have the flexibility to work from home or to work in the office, I feel a lot more supportive. It means that you trust me. And when you have trust, then I feel like I belong here. But if you micromanage me, I don't feel like you trust me. And I don't feel like I belong here. And I feel like this is becoming something unhealthy. Being a good manager is also setting up one-on-ones with each of your colleagues. And that could be up from 10 to 15 minutes a week, just to go over what everyone's doing on their projects and what to prioritize and talking it through. You're not telling them what to prioritize unless they ask. It's more of like working with them to figure out what things are okay, what things they need to get off their plate, or what are some other projects that they can give to someone else. And it's also good to note this, that we need to do better as managers and be more there for our employees, because we're one of the reasons why they're not having a happy life, possibly. So it's up to us to do whatever we can to be a better manager, because we want to see them thrive. If you're a manager that doesn't want an employee to go beyond your personal role, you should not be a manager. That's a really unhealthy situation. That's you needing to get a check with your self-esteem. And I'm just going to be blunt about it, because I've seen it happen so many times where I see an employer basically pull the ladder from an overachieving employee because they're worried about their job being threatened. That's not the way a manager is supposed to be. I'm a manager, and let me tell you one thing. I want my people, or the people that I work with, my teammates, to go beyond me. My job as a manager is to bring a ladder and hold that ladder for my employees. And the reason for that is because that's what being a manager is. It's a coach, it's a mentor, it is someone who's going to lead and help bring their dreams and their careers to life. And if you can't do that, you should not be a manager. And if you're a micromanager, you shouldn't be a manager either. So you may want to look at a different role. And also to all the other workers out there that, have a really, really bad manager, I'm so sorry. It is not easy. But we'll get into that part in a little bit. Let's talk about a little bit how to bounce back. So the other parts was about how to recognize you're in burnout and what to do if you have beginning stages of burnout. We're going to talk about now how to stop having burnout, in a sense that you need to be aware of. And now this is going to be a hard moment for you, maybe, because it's going to require you to do some serious self-digging. And by self-digging, I mean more like having a better understand where you're standing right now. If you are burned out and you know you're burned out, you need to take time off. There is no other solution that can help you at this moment. You have to take time off. And I do recommend taking at least 1 week off. I used to say do 3 days, but to be honest, by the time that we're recognizing that we're burned out and when we ask for time off, you probably need actually at least 1 week off. So take 1 week off. And when you do, take off all devices. Don't look at your work email. Don't look at Slack. Turn them all off. Log off with Twitter, and take that time off. And really just spend time with yourself doing anything that is not infosec related. If anything, it could be hanging out with your kids. It could be hanging out with your significant other. It could be hanging out with your pups, hanging out with your kids. Or if you have a reptile, cool, other things, just take time off for yourself. And I know it's a little bit stressful for us to take time off because then we're thinking, who's going to do the work that I do? Because probably on my team, someone cannot do the work I do. And I'm going to tell you something that you need to listen to yourself right now. If you do one thing that no one else does at the office and you need to take time off, chances are you've been needing to take time off for a very, very long time. If you feel like you're holding people together and to be able to push things forward, because without you, the team wouldn't do anything, you need to take time off. And if anything, I would tell to that person, try to take 2 weeks off. The reality is that when we're overachievers or when we are the top performer, we're asked to do a lot more things. And so this is one of the reasons why we need to take time off more. And especially if you're leading a team, you need to take time off too. If you're a manager overseeing a team, you need to take the time off too, because if you are burned out, you are impacting the other people on that team. By you being burned out, chances are you may have anger or sadness really fast, or you might be micromanaging, or you may be completely out of the loop, it feels like, or you feel so exhausted you're not able to focus on everything and prioritize things, then it's time to take time off. Taking time off isn't just for you, it's also for your team. You cannot be one of those people who's like, I'm just going to stay in this and keep going. Don't do that, because you're setting up your team to fail too. We have to take care of ourselves to be able to take care of each other. So take the time off. And if you're stressed out about taking time off, besides that fact, just what you do is on your day back, just have it completely blocked so you can't have any meetings. Have no meetings at all. I know that sounds like really crazy, but don't do any meetings on that day. Instead, you go to your inbox and you check your emails, you go through them, but also when you go back to your inbox, send a message when you feel more comfortable to on that day to your team and asking if there's anything that you need to do immediately within the next 24 hours. And also when you are away, you should have a policy at your company that you don't do Slack messaging, instead CC or BCC the person in an email chains. Email chains actually will help you organize everything. When we come back to work and we have to check Slack, we have to check our phones, we have to check our emails, it's 3 different places at least that we're checking. And that's really, really stressful for us. And that's going to lead to a miscommunication. So this becomes another issue and actually a security risk too at the same time. So it's really important is that we work together on that. The other thing I need to tell you is that if you are burned out right now, you need to learn to say no. And I know that's a really hard thing to do because some of us, we like to bend backwards for one another. Or it's also a hard thing if you're a marginalized person or also someone who's basically the overachiever, because we constantly need to take on more roles. It's not like we want to take on more roles. It's usually because people add it to us. And this is the problem, because when they do that and it's not part of a role, when we say no, we become a problem. And this is something that we need to look and address in our industry, but also by the employer. Employers need to learn that if that is not part of my role and I've already had this amount of stuff on my plate, giving me more work, you're setting me up to have a situation. Instead, it should be more of a community opening about figuring out what to do about this project and having a discussion about it. But putting it on to another employee that's not their job is not okay. I know too many people that are marginalized in our community that basically have been doing 3 jobs by one person or more. And that's so not okay. And the reason that they're doing that is because sometimes it's actually a practice of discrimination. You know how many women work in our industry and then they're told to do secretary work on top of their job? Their job isn't being a secretary, but yet they're doing secretary work on top of their role. That's not okay. So the thing is, we have to learn to say no. And if we work at an employer where we know it's going to be bad to say no, it might be a time to look elsewhere. The other thing is that you may be burnt out because you're one of those people that is on this road of the never-ending situation of wanting to be perfect. And we have to accept that we're never going to be perfect. And that's okay. It's okay to not be perfect. Why would you want to be perfect? What does that mean? What does perfection mean to you? You don't have to be perfect. You don't always have to do everything on the time and the dot, because chances are, by you trying to be perfect at your job, you're forgetting about all the other things that make you who you are. And so it's so important is that we have to accept that by constantly focusing on trying to be perfect, and we know it's an impossible task, it's just setting us up to feel like we failed. And this is the part where we need to look at ourselves. We need to learn how to invest in ourselves. The chances are that you might be burnt out because you don't know how to practice self-care, or you put self-care last. And this becomes a problem. It's the moment where you have to reevaluate your life and think, what is it that my job is preventing me from doing this or being happy? You have every right to be happy in your life. No one should take away your happiness. No one should prevent you from having happiness. But the reality is that we have to look at ourselves and find out what is causing us to get burned out over and over. Is it the need to be perfect? Why is that? Is it the need of basically taking on more roles at our job because we're trying to make sure our team can deliver? Then we need to look at ourselves. Why are we doing this? Why are we being an overgiver? Because there is a such thing of that. Or maybe when we're like, I don't want to take vacation off because I'm worried about my team, if they're going to be able to move forward, or I'm worried when I get back, it's going to be overwhelming. Why is it like that? These are the questions you need to ask yourselves. But most importantly, the one question you can always ask to see whether or not if you are doing a good job in your life is, am I balancing my work hours with my personal life? If your job has become your life, it is time to invest in yourself outside of infosec. If you are a person that you are in infosec 24/7, all your friends are in infosec, you don't have any other friends outside of that, it's time to look at yourself and figure out, how can I get to know the world a little bit more? Because there may be a sense of you that feels like something's missing. But I want you to all understand this one thing. Our industry has set us up to fail. And if you're wondering, Chloe, I'm confused, don't all industries do this? No. And if you're like, well, tech does this? No. The reality is that by being in security, majority of basically C-levels and boards believe that security members are going to work all hours. They already have assumed this. So if you're not doing this, this becomes a problem. Our industry has made it so hard for us to have a personal life outside of our work life that it's time that we start recognizing this. Burnout has not been a conversation since the beginning of 2020. Burnout has been an ongoing conversation since before the pandemic, and we've done nothing about it. We keep talking about, but we're not doing anything about it. We need to actually fix this problem, because it's not just you. Not all this is on you. Please understand this. It's also because we're in an industry that is setting us up to fail and to have burnout all the time. There's not an industry out there that really forces you to work 24/7. And that's the thing we have to recognize, is that this is not a flexible type of work and roles in our industry. And yes, people are even like, well, then you shouldn't be in our industry if you have a problem with this. But hear me out on this. If we don't become more flexible, that is never going to be a good practice for diversity and equity and inclusion. You cannot have DEI without flexibility and acknowledging that this is a serious situation. We have to do better. we have to come up with solutions because our industry is not is rewarding what? Us getting burned out and self-medicating? No, and it shouldn't be that way. We need to do better. So if you have some ideas on how to make this better, connect with me, because that is what I'm trying to fix right now, is how do we do better in our industry? How can we create an industry, in a sense, that is making us feel empowered and not disempowered, that makes us feel like we're excited all the time to come into the office, and that we don't feel used, we feel appreciated, we feel recognized, that it's okay for us to take vacation, and that we don't have to worry in the middle of the night of like, if something bad's going to happen and we're going to have to wake up. The reality is that we need to do better, because the way that we have it set up, we're going to continuously get burned out. And you might probably been burned out multiple times, or you just have this ongoing burnout. And that's bad. We shouldn't have to be putting up with this. No one should. And it's okay to state that. And it's okay to push for things to change, because the only way you're going to change things is by being vocal about it. So takeaways is, when you feel overwhelmed, do a device detox. That means turning off your phones for a whole day and whatnot. And also, if you're taking time off, like vacation and whatnot, don't go on your computer. If you do, don't do any social media. Don't do anything that's related to infosec. When you're reading books, don't do infosec books. Do something completely different. Go for sci-fi, or you know what? Read a kid's book. Write some poetry. Learn how to play a guitar or a harp, whatever is your fancy. When you feel overwhelmed, invest in yourself. This is something important, is to invest in yourself, because who is going to invest in you besides yourself? When we invest in ourselves, we start having better confidence. And when we have better confidence, magical things can happen. And also know what your boundaries are. And when people cross that, then you're not investing in yourself. So have boundaries, invest in your boundaries, invest in yourself. When you feel overwhelmed, ask for help. I know it's one of the hardest things, is to ask for help when you see other people are barely hanging on around you, especially during the pandemic. But it's one thing is just to acknowledge that asking for help, no one's going to know if you're going through something unless you do. When you feel overwhelmed, write it down. You have those to-do lists, you have journaling. This helps you have a good idea of what's going on. Now, a quick thing I want you to know is, don't do this on your phone. Don't journal on your computer, journal by hand. The reason for that is that you might be going to bed and your to-do list, if it's on your phone, you're going to do it, put it in your phone, and then what's going to happen is you're going to go to Twitter, you're going to read the news, you're going to check your emails. You can't stop. And so this is the thing, is that if you want to get better sleep at night, have a to-do list that's written down and just carry it everywhere you go, instead of looking at your phone and put it in a, I don't know, an Evernote or something, or your notepad. Going back to this is, when you feel overwhelmed, take a break. You have every right to take a break. Do it. When you feel overwhelmed, put yourself first. There's a reason why you're on a flight and it says to put the airbag on you before helping another person, because you cannot help another person if you cannot even be able to breathe, or if you can't. It just, that's how the world is. By not taking care of ourselves, how can we take care of another person? You can't just keep giving and giving and expect to get good results for yourself. It's also about taking care of you and knowing when to say no. When you feel overwhelmed, know that you're not alone. You are not alone in this, okay? Burnout, it happens. It definitely happens in our industry. I don't know a single person in our industry that has never been burned out before. So it's really important to know that you're not alone. And most importantly, always ask the question, am I balancing my work and personal life? If it's a no, then take steps to fix it. You already know you're burned out. That's it. That's the only big question you need to ask yourself. Am I balancing my work and personal life? If not, then you're not balancing well. And you know you're heading to burnout or already in burnout. I just want to say thank you guys so much for existing, and thank you for having me. And it's wonderful to be here. And I'm so looking forward to seeing everyone in person in the future, in person. And I hope very, very soon. I'm hoping this year. Anyway, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. My Twitter and Instagram handle is right there. Honestly, you know, it's going to be okay. At the end of the day, if you're burned out right now, it's going to be okay. Just remember to take some time off for yourself and focus on you, on what makes you happy in your life, because you have the right to have a happy life. All right, you guys, thank you so much again, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.